Hello, everybody. Welcome to the North Shore Players Fall 2020 production of Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. My name is Dylan. I'm the director for this production. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight as we work to keep the arts alive during these difficult times. This entire cast and crew have worked so hard over the last few months to bring you something that we hope will make you laugh after what we knew would be a pretty long and stressful week. There will be two brief intermissions tonight, one after Act 1 for 5 minutes and one after Act 2 for 2 minutes. We are so proud to provide free entertainment during these difficult times, and we're so appreciative of everybody who has donated to show their support. If you would like to donate, go to northshoreplayers.org/donate. Or click the link in the description below. Keep an eye out on our website and Facebook page for news about upcoming productions, including next weekend's performance of She Kills Monsters. Tickets for that are available on our website, northshoreplayers.org. Without any further ado, grab a glass of sherry and a cucumber sandwich and enjoy the importance of being earnest.
Oh, did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that. For your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. It is my observance that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Oh, good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a rather pleasant state, sir. I have very little experience of it myself. I was only married once, and that was a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I am much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It's not very interesting. I rarely think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, sir.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people.
And who are the people you amuse?
Neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Eh? Shropshire? Oh, yes, of course. Look at that. Cucumber sandwiches, Wallabies, cups. Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
Perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I don't see anything romantic in proposals. And it's very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. And then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algie. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
Oh, there's no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please! Don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is, too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat as if you were going to eat it all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
In the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily. Lane!
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algie, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you have had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to the papers about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Oh, well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
A good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think that is very mean of you, Ernest, I must say. But now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what's written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't read. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Give it back to me, Algie.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is a matter that surely an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. For heaven's sake, Algie, just give me back my cigarette case.
But why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It is Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
You've always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I've ever seen in my life. It is perfectly absurd you're suggesting that your name is not Ernest. It's on your cards. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I shall keep this as proof that your name is Ernest, in case you ever attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolen, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that doesn't account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you had much better have the whole thing out at once.
My dear Algy, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now go on, tell me the whole thing. I might mention that I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I am quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Earnest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation and pray, make it improbable.
There is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle out of motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
And where is that place in the country, by the way?
Oh, that is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algy, I don't know if you would be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You should leave that for people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you'd like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down to the country as much as I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it weren't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I have been really engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, when I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family and sent down with either no woman at all or 2. In the third place, I know perfectly well whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it isn't even decent, and that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women who flirt with their own husbands in the city is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It's simply washing one's own clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I am going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So I am going to get rid of him. And I strongly advise you to do the same with with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
Oh, that is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she is the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry. I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company, and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you can have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes! But you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
Well, that's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolen?
Thank you, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market, sir. I went down this morning twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed color. From what cause, I of course could not say. Thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I will have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me, but the fact is, I have just received a telegram to tell me that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a terrible invalid.
Well, I must say, I think it is high time this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd, nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing that should be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I am always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. I would be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has practically said whatever it is they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I shall speak to Bunbury Aunt Augusta if he is still conscious.
Mhm.
And I think I can promise you that he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. And if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program with you if you will kindly come to the room with me for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe is so. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite aware of that. Although I do wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always held an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpit, so I'm told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment that Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, oh, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is. But do you mean to say that if I had some other name, you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has music on its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolen, I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? There is very little music in the name Jack. If any at all, indeed. No, it does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known more than several Jacks, and they all, without exception, have been more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John. And I pity any poor woman who is married to a man called John. She is probably never allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. No. No, the only truly safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
Well, I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing at all has been said about marriage. The subject hasn't even been touched upon.
Well, may I propose to you now?
Yes. I think it an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolen?
Yes, yes, Mr. Worthing. What is it that you have to say to me?
You know what I have got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Yes, of course, darling. How long have you been about it? I'm afraid that you have had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one, I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Well, yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. Oh, Ernest, your eyes. Oh, they are so brown. They are very quite brown. Oh, I hope you'll always look at me just like this, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Mr. Worthing hasn't finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
Mr. Worthing and I are engaged to be married, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise. Pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be, it is hardly a matter she should be allowed to decide for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. And while I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the car.
But Mamma!
Gwendolen, the car. In the car, Gwendolen.
Yes, Mamma!
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list that the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I am glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in the city as it is. How old are you?
29.
Perfectly good age to be married at. I have always been of opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in this country at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would lead to a serious danger for the upper classes. And probably lead to violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 8 and 900,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
Well, that sounds not unsatisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position, and yet prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
I have a country house, of course, with some land attached to it, but I don't depend on that for my real income. About 1,500 acres, I believe. In fact, as far as I can make out, only the poachers make anything out of it.
A country house. How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. I can, however, get it back whenever I like at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham. I don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both. If necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I am a moderate.
Oh, they count as Republicans. They dine with us, or come in the evening at any rate. Now, on to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce? Or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents. It would be nearer the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me, and gave me the name of Worthing, because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did this charitable gentleman with the first-class ticket for this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag?
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag, a somewhat large, black leather handbag, with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
The cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
Yes. The Brighton line?
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a certain social indiscretion. Has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now, but it can hardly be regarded for an assured position in recognized society.
May I ask you then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolen's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite attempt to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It's in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly believe that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. For heaven's sake, Algie, don't play that idiotic tune.
Didn't the thing go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolen refused you? Oh, I know it is a way she has. She's always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolen is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Mother, perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. At any rate, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I beg your pardon, Algie. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It's the only reason I put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, or the smallest instinct about when to die.
But that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That's what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You, don't think there's any chance of Gwendolen becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algie?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation should be in civilized life.
I am sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without running into clever people. I wish we had a few fools left.
We have.
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, did you tell Gwendolen the truth about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
The truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her, if she is pretty, and to someone else, if she is plain.
That is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Oh, before the end of the week, I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of, apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You had much better say, a severe chill.
You are sure severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well, then. My poor brother is carried off in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But didn't you say that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest? Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Oh, that is all right. Cecily is not a silly, romantic girl, I am glad to say. She has a capital appetite, goes long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
I will take extremely good care you never do. She is excessively pretty and only just 18.
Does Gwendolen know yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
One doesn't just blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolen are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only call each other that when they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we have got to go in dress. Do you know that it is nearly 7?
Oh, it always is nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Go to a theater?
Oh, no, I love listening.
Oh, let us go to the club.
Oh, no, I hate talking.
We might trot round to the Empire at 10.
Oh, no, I can't bear looking at things. They're so silly.
Then what shall we do?
Nothing?
It is awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind hard work when there's no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolen, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolen, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algie, you always adopt a very strict, immoral attitude toward life, and I don't think you're old enough for that.
My home, darling.
Ernest, I fear that we never will be married from the expression on Mamma's face. Few parents nowadays pay any attention at all to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I ever had over Mamma, I must have lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do will ever alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolen.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. The simplicity of your character makes you incomprehensible to me, and your Christian name makes you absolutely incomprehensible. Your address in town at the Albany, I know, but what is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is good postal service there, I suppose. We may need to do something desperate, and it will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
Oh, my own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn round now.
Thanks, I've turned around already.
And you may ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your car, my own darling?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back until Monday. You can put up all my dress clothes and my smoking jacket and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
There's a sensitive, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in my life. What are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm just a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that's all.
You don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
Oh, I love scrapes. They're the only things in life that are never serious.
That is nonsense. You never say anything but nonsense.
No one ever does.
Cecily, surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it to page 15. We'll repeat yesterday's lesson.
I don't like German. It isn't all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. And he laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he's so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is rather to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one with a higher sense of duty or responsibility.
I suppose that's why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
Well, I wish that Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know, German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect upon a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not sure that I should desire to reclaim him. I am not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't know why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter all the wonderful secrets in my life. If I didn't write them all down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily, because I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. Was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up to the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this afternoon? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism had just been complaining about a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. I suppose Mr. Worthing has not returned from town yet?
We do not expect him until Monday afternoon.
He usually likes to spend his Sundays in town. He is not one of those for whom enjoyment is his sole aim, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I should see you both, no doubt, at evensong?
I think, dear doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache, after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That sounds delightful. Cecily, you'll read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
A Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany, W. Uncle Jack's brother! Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Tell Mr. Ernest Worthing to come out here. I suppose I'd better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. Well, I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he'll look just like everyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe that I'm more than usually quite tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I'm not really wicked at all, Cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I'm wicked.
If you're not, then you certainly have been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Of course, I have been rather reckless.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that. Though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you hear it all. Uncle Jack will be back until Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up on the first train on Monday. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in the city?
No, the appointment is in the city.
Uh-huh. Well, of course, I know how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But still, I think you had better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone up to buy your outfits.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfits. He has no taste in neckties at all.
Oh, I don't think you'll require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, the accounts I've received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
Oh, I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I have no time this afternoon.
Oh. Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A Marshall Neal?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would wish to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I should know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand, but a womanthrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. A man should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is not a man equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often, I'm told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. These young women are green. Oh, I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing.
This is indeed a surprise. We had not looked for you until Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance?
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother Earnest. Dead.
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing you were the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad. In Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seemed.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt like me to make some slight allusion to this terrible domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful, or as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, days of humiliation, and festal days. The last time I delivered it was at the cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the Upper Orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by the analogies I drew.
Ah, that reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen, all right? I mean, of course, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's more constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But was there any particular infant in whom you were interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. I am very fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself. This afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely you have been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
Why, I certainly intend to have. But, of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all, not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. A sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you like the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot around about 5 if that would suit you.
Oh, perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that same time. A case of twins which occurred recently in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins, the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies, so it would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now I must no longer intrude into this house of woe. I merely ask that you not be too bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials may be blessings in disguise.
This seems to me to be a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! I'm so happy to see you back! Oh, but what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child, my child.
What's the matter, Uncle Jack? You look happy. You look as if you had a toothache. And I got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother, Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may behave to you, he is still your brother. And you couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me particularly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. I think it's perfectly absurd. Good heavens.
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I've given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, who he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be such good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of the city to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he has been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he has told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side. But I must say that I think Brother John's coldness towards me is peculiarly painful. I expected a much more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering this is the first time I've come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It is pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation. I think we should leave these brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
Well, I feel rather happy.
Algy, you young scoundrel! You have to get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any bunburying here.
I've put Mr. Earnest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Earnest's luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the car at once. Mr. Earnest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I haven't been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I didn't hear anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
Oh, I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? Oh, it is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying with you in your house as a guest for an entire week. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
You can't expect me to leave you so long as you're in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. You would stay with me if I were in mourning, I suppose. I would think it most unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you are not too long. I have never seen anyone take so long to dress and with such little result.
Well, at any rate, that is better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. This bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I am in love with Cecily, and that is everything. Oh, but I must go and see her before I make arrangements for another Bunbury. Oh, there she is.
Oh, I merely just came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the car for me.
Oh. Is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we've got to part?
I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It's always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends, one can endure equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Oh, thank you.
The car is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way possible the visible personification of absolute perfection.
Oh, I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Oh, do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a young girl's records of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I do hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on now. I'm quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think they should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly. Hopelessly, it doesn't seem to make much sense now, does it?
Cecily.
The car is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very annoyed if he knew you were staying till next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care for anyone in this whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
Oh, you silly boy, of course. Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Mm-hmm. It'll be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. Of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One must feel there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling, and when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under that dear old tree there. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name and this spangle with a true lover's knot that I promise you to always wear.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for you leading such a bad life. Oh, and in this box is where I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my own sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
Oh, you need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I always wrote 3 times a week and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, no, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The last 3 you have written me after I'd broken off our engagement were so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today, I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
Why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I'm very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it would hardly have been a serious engagement if it had been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
Yes, darling, with a little help from others.
Ooh, I'm so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily.
I don't think I could ever break it off, now that I've actually met you. Besides, of course, there is a question of your name.
Yes, of course.
Now, you mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Earnest. There's something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. And I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
but my dear child, do you mean to say that you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
Oh, but I don't like the name of Algernon.
But my own dear, sweet, loving little darling Cecily. I don't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not at all a bad name, and in fact, it is a rather aristocratic name. Half the chaps who get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, could you not love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character. But I fear that I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly practiced and experienced in all rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh, yes. Dr. Chasuble is the most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on a most important christening. I mean, on most important business.
Oh.
I shan't be gone for more than half an hour.
Considering that we've only been engaged since February the 14th, and I only met you for the first time today, I think it is rather hard for you to leave me for such a long period as in half hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I do like his hair so much. I must enter the proposal in my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called for Mr. Worthing. On very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask Lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax. I suppose one of the elderly good women who are associated with Uncle Jack and his philanthropic work. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we are going to be great friends. I already like you more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
Oh, how nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other for such a comparatively short time.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Then it is quite settled then, isn't it?
I sure hope so.
Perhaps now would be a favorable opportunity to tell you who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is almost entirely unknown. And that is as it should be. The home, it seems to me, is the proper sphere for the man. Indeed, once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate. And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. You are here on a very short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Oh, well, your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides with you also?
Oh, no, I have no mother, nor, in fact, any relations.
Oh, indeed?
My dear guardian, along with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. Well, he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that this news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I have met you. But I feel bound to point out that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help but express a wish that you were, well, just a little bit older than you appear to be, and not quite so alluring in appearance. In fact, if I might be quite candid.
Oh, pray do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, then to be perfectly candid then, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Earnest has a very strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty to him would be almost as impossible as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character can be susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. Indeed, if it were not so, history would be almost unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen, but did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it's not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It's his brother, his elder brother.
Well, Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
Well, I'm sorry to say that they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Huh. Well, that accounts for it. And now that I think about it, I have never once heard a man mention his brother. The subject seems almost distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have taken a load off my mind. I was growing almost anxious. Oh, it would have been terrible if any cloud could have come across a friendship such as ours, would it not? But you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm engaged to be his!
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolen, there's no reason why I should make it a secret of it to you. But our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact that next week, Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
Well, there might be a slight error, Miss Cardew. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to be married to me. The announcement will be in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago today.
Oh, that is curious, for he proposed to me yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. Oh, I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but, well, I'm afraid it appears I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
Well, if the poor fellow has entrapped himself into any foolish entanglement, well, I consider it my duty to rescue him, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten into, I will never reproach him with it until after we are married.
Do you refer to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On occasions of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners.
It is obvious that our social circles have been widely different.
Shall I lay the tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there any interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, quite many. On the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
Oh, 5 counties. Oh, I don't think I like that. I hate crowds.
Oh, I suppose that's why you live in town.
Oh, quite a well-kept garden, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were flowers in the country.
yes. Flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in the city.
Oh. Personally, I can't understand how anybody manages to exist in the country if anybody who is anybody does. Personally, the country always bores me to death.
Ah. This is what the newspapers call an agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it just at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, as I've been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Yes, thank you. Detestable girl. But I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar isn't fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake isn't seen in the best households these days.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the sweetness of my disposition and the gentleness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
Oh, from the first, I knew you were deceitful. I knew you were false. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls that make of a similar character in the neighborhood.
Ernest! Oh, my own Ernest!
Gwendolen, darling.
A moment, Ernest. I must ask you. Are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
The dear little Cecily? Oh, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present around your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Oh!
Here's Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
What? Good heavens. Gwendolen.
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolen. I mean, to Gwendolen.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
Oh, I thought there might be a slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon? Moncrief? Ah! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Are you really called John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. However, my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
Gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor, sweet Cecily.
My sweet Ron Gwendolen.
You will call me sister, won't you?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An excellent idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother, Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother, Ernest. So it is of some importance for us to know exactly where your brother, Ernest, is just at present.
Gwendolen, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I have ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I am really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you, quite frankly, that I have no brother, Ernest. I have no brother at all. I never had a brother in my life, and I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Have you never a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
It seems to me, dear Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It's certainly an unpleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, and what a perfectly wonderful bunberry it is. The most wonderful bunberry I've ever had in my life.
Well, you've no right whatsoever to bunbury here.
Oh, that's absurd. One has a right to bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious bunburyist knows that.
Bunburyist? Good heavens!
Well, one has to be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about bunburying. What on earth you're serious about, I haven't got the remotest idea. About everything I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction that I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to, dear Algie. And a very good thing, too.
Your brother's looking a little off-color, isn't he, Jack? Oh, you won't be able to disappear to the city quite as often as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing at all.
As for your conduct toward Miss Cardew, I must say that your taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable. To say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defense at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolen, that is all. I love her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There's certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there's much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It's very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
How you can sit there calmly eating muffins when we are in this horrible trouble, I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. No, one must always eat muffins very calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it is perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Yes, when I am in great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse nothing but food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Oh, that is no reason why I should eat them all in that greedy way.
Oh, I wish you would have tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens! I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you have just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Ouchie, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly expect me to leave without having some dinner first. It would be absurd. I never go without my dinner. No one ever does except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I actually would take the name of Ernest. Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be christened Ernest. It's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence at all that I have ever been christened by anybody. I should think it extremely probable I never was, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I have not been christened in years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know that my constitution can stand it. If you're not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It could make you very unwell. You can't forget that you had someone very closely connected with you nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said a severe chill was not hereditary.
It usedn't be, I know, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
That is nonsense. You are always talking nonsense.
Oh, Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left, and I told you that I'm particularly fond of muffins.
I hate cake.
Then why on earth do you allow it to be served up for your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality?
I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet, and there is still 1 muffin left.
The fact that they did not follow me at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
But they aren't noticing us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't gotten a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery.
Oh, they're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence is producing a most unpleasing effect.
Most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, kindly answer me the following question. Much depends upon your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems like a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
Well, I don't, but that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, kindly answer me the following question. To what purpose can you provide that you pretended to have a brother? Was it perhaps so that you might have every opportunity possible to come up to see me in town?
You doubted Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the time for German skepticism. Their answers seem satisfactory enough, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I'm more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires absolute credulity.
So you think we should forgive them?
Yes, I mean no.
True. There are principles at stake which we cannot surrender. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, are you prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you're ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How foolish of us to talk about the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell.
Good heavens!
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, of physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. Of course, you will understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no. Oh, Bunbury doesn't live here. Oh, Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did he die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Oh, Bunbury? Oh, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I had no idea Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean that the doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. So, what I mean is that Bunbury died.
Well, he seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we have got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me to be a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the amount of engagements that go on seems to me to be above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea there were any persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, SW, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, NB.
Well, that sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period, Lady Bracknell. They are open to your inspection.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby, and Markby. A firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys can occasionally be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
Ah, a life crowded with incident, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I am not myself in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about 15 million in the funds, that is all. Goodbye, so pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. 15 million and in the funds. Well, Miss Cardew seems to me to be a most attractive young lady, now that I look at her. Few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come over here, dear. Oh, Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, but we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous result in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lansing, and after 3 months, her own husband did not know her.
After 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn round, sweet child. No, the side view is what I want.
Oh,
Yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn, and they are worn very high just at present. Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
there are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl I have ever seen in the whole world. And I don't give 2 pence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. My dear, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon, though I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Oh, thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me. Mwah.
thank you, Lady Bracknell.
And you may address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Oh, thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Oh, thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I am not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Carter's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she legally comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say an ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more could one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to Lady Bracknell about your nephew, but the fact is that I do not approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon. Impossible. He is an Oxonian.
I'm afraid there can be no possible doubt about this matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Jouet Brut 89, a wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. What makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly well aware from the first that I have no brother, that I never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
How very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I'm really only 18, but I always admit to 20s when I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, I don't think it will be very long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me for interrupting you again, Lady Bracknell, but it is only fair for me to tell you that, according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age till she is 35.
Well, that does not seem to me to be a very grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. Society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my own knowledge, she has remained 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be still more attractive at the age you mention than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
You know I could, Cecily. Of course I could.
Yes, I felt instinctively, but I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting for 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I do like punctuality in others, but I'm not punctual myself. And waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
And what's to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait until she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say shows a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But, my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most certainly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, Gwendolen, we must depart. We've already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is ready for the christenings.
The christenings, sir? Is not that somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he learned that that was the way you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand that there are to be no christenings this afternoon?
I don't think that, as things are now, it would be of much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
It grieves me to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savor of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views which I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood is peculiarly secular, I will return to the church. Indeed, I have heard from the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I am on my way to join her.
Pray, allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be one of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been, for the last 3 years, Miss Cardew's valued companion and esteemed governess.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expect me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting for you here for an hour and 3/4.
Prism. Come here, Prism. Prism. Where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house number 104, Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigation of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered by itself at midnight in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Now, I must admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capricious handbag in which I intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript into the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Oh, do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in the city.
What railway station?
Victoria! The right line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, I shall wait for you all my life.
What does all this mean, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chaswell. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They're hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
Oh, for heaven's sake!
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if you were having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
I wish he would arrive at some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Miss Prism, is this the handbag? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It appears to be mine. Yes, there's the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. And there is the stain on the lining that was caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. Oh, and there the lock of my initials. I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I am delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
More is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes. Mother.
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny that is a serious blow. But after all, who among us can cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I am afraid that the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Well, then I have a brother after all! I knew I had a brother! I always thought I had a brother! Cecily, how could you ever doubt it that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother! Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother! Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother! You young scoundrel, Algy, you will have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Well, not till today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, however, though I was out of practice.
Oh, my own. Oh, but what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Good heavens, I'd quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affection.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
And the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism had placed me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened after all. Oh, that is cleared up. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I do not at the present moment recall what the general's Christian name was,
Oh,
though I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, though that was only in later years, and that was the result of climate change and indigestion, marriage, and things of that kind.
Algie, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His names would appear in the army records of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta.
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life, though I have no doubt his name would appear in any military directory.
The military records of the last 40 years are here. Oh, these delightful records should have been my constant study. Generals. Malum, Maxbaum, Magley. What ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief. Lieutenant, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, General. Christian names? Ernest John. I always told you, Gwendolen, that my name was Ernest, didn't I? Well, it is Ernest after all. I mean, it naturally is Ernest.
Yes, now I recall that the general's Christian name was Earnest. I knew I had some reason for disliking the name.
My own Ernest! I knew from the first that you could have no other name.
It is a very terrible thing for a man to find out that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel sure you're to change.
My own one.
Oh, Letitia!
Frederick! At last!
Cecily, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.